Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. I am really excited for this conversation today. I am joined by Samantha Runkel from Heyterra, which is a sustainable travel platform for families. Many of my listeners will know that I am I think we're at about 8 weeks now from setting off on a year-long journey with my 3 daughters. And obviously sustainability and family travel are things that are on my mind right now. So I'm super excited to connect with you and learn more about your journey and the work that you're doing. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I can't believe you're 8 weeks out. That's so exciting.
So just right around the corner, I've actually started booking a few of the first things and it's starting to feel really real. And my daughters are now starting to talk about it. Just in the car yesterday, actually, they were like, we've been talking about it for so long. It felt so far away. And now it's happening. Now I'm starting to get nervous and excited and all of these things. So we'll see how that evolves as we go on. But to begin our conversation, Samantha, I'd love to just turn it over to you and let you tell my listeners a little bit more about who you are, about Heyterra, and the work that you're doing right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Samantha Runkel. I'm the founder of, as Christine said, Heyterra, which is an online publication and blog and platform that really seeks to engage and empower families to travel and get out there, but also do it in a more thoughtful and responsible and sustainable way. We're still building all the content on the site right now, and I'm kind of in perpetual startup mode, but we do include the stories of travel families. We give responsible travel tips. We feature interviews with changemakers who are voices out in, from communities around the world that we link travelers up with as they're on the road, as well as organizations that are making a positive ripple effect. And we also give environmental education that you can take out on the road with you, but also do back home and implement into your own community. So it's been a really wonderful project, and I've personally learned so much in this last year.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I was just looking on there as I was preparing for this conversation and exploring more on the site and finding some articles that I think will be really valuable for me in preparing, but also in thinking about how to educate my kids along the way, not in the terms of school education, but how to create conversations with them and get them more engaged in the travel experience. And I know that'll be some things that we're going to talk about. So I look forward to getting to that. But before we get there, I would love to hear a little bit more about your background, about when you started traveling and really the experiences that you had that set you on your current path to Heyterra. So kind of your journey through travel.
Absolutely. Well, I love to say I wasn't a traditional traveler from the beginning. I was actually a musician by trade. And so up until my early 30s, I was a professional musician, which was a great way to also kind of travel. If you really look at it, going from city to city and going and setting up for sound check and then going to have dinner in the local breweries or so and talking to people on the ground. That was kind of a way of traveling and experiencing the world. But it wasn't until I met my husband about 12 years ago, and he's a travel photographer. So that really just completely flipped my world upside down, where I was able to shadow him around the world and basically jump on his round the world trip with him and travel as a travel photographer does, and see the world through his lens in a way, which was an absolutely beautiful lens to see the world. And so this is how I sort of became a traveler myself. And it was a great education and kind of deep dive, almost world schooling for me, a person who has been kind of in the entertainment industry for the majority of my life, to open up and find this new section and phase of my life, which was beautiful. I mean, it was just a new discovery. I was actually inspired musically through so much of our experiences. And since then, we would continue to travel, and we're together, and we have 2 children now. We live in Germany. And I've kind of just translated that trajectory of creativity and discovery through music to traveling with our children. And that's what it really has become. And I think my, passion, or maybe as a environmentalist or an activist, I was always afraid to kind of speak up as a musician because I was writing pop songs and I didn't think that I deserved to speak about it. But I was looking back on some of my songs recently. I said, oh my gosh, I'm talking about all of these environmental issues from a pop frame. I said, I really did care about this. I just didn't have the knowledge or the insight back then. And I've been able to kind of put a realistic kind of a layer on top of it to discover that this is something that I can speak about. And now I have the expertise, and with my children who are going to be carrying on into the future.
Mm-hmm. I love, part of the thing of getting older is the ability to reflect upon who you were and on your journey, and seeing kind of how things were already laid down for you. I'm going to pause just a second because I can't tell if we lost.
Hi there.
There she is. Okay.
There she is too. Oh, it's great.
Yeah. So what I was just going to say, the process of reflecting and looking back over, some of our choices or the way we showed up. I love that you saw that, you didn't think you were expressing some of those values through your music, but really realized you were doing it, and maybe in a more subtle way, or in a way that felt maybe curated for that moment that you're in, but now you're able to kind of take that message and amplify it and honor the truth of that a little bit more in yourself. I just think it's so powerful to be able to see that in our own journeys and witness, like, oh, I thought this was a new part of me, but actually it's always just been like whispering the same message, and until we pick up on it. You mentioned, as you traveled, that you initially were really seeing, travel through your husband's literal lens, but then, music started to find its way, and that you really have used music as sort of a through line to explore the world once you kind of stepped into your own travel experiences. Can you share a little bit more about how travel has helped you connect to music, or music has helped you to connect to the world?
Absolutely. Well, it was, I really was doing music as my career before I met my husband, and it's always been my way of communicating. And I have had a guitar since I was a 13-year-old, playing in cafes and writing songs. So it was just always my way of connecting with people. And I feel, as I started to travel with Michael, just like how Anthony Bourdain was connecting with people through food and kind of breaking the rhetorical bread with people in different cultures and communities and having that different conversation, I feel like music also allows us to connect to something greater than sometimes just words or conversation is. And music has always, for me, been a way to transcend, but also I think for even just sitting and enjoying a concert, it's a way to experience something. And applying that when you are in different cultures that have their own traditional ways of expressing music was absolutely profound. And further than that I had noticed is, kind of learning about our humanity and history through the evolution of instruments, and said, why is the accordion, how did the accordion get from, Germany over to Colombia, or how did it get down to South Africa? You more research into that and seeing how it came down on merchant ships and how the instrument kind of evolved as it landed on different continents. This to me was fascinating. And it's kind of a way to connect our history as people, and music has always been a connective between cultures and storytelling. And so I was really lit up by traveling that way with Michael, and music will always be in my life. It always is. I don't do it professionally anymore, but I always take a minute and think about and listen for what kind of music is happening in the streets whenever we travel.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting for people to take a moment and really examine how they connect to other cultures, because I think, again, this is something that maybe is always happening, but we're not present to. And then really using that as a way to form like a deeper connection. Talking with my daughters, my oldest is a dancer, and she was thinking about like different dance styles in some of the countries that we're going to. And she was thinking, well, maybe I could learn this here and this here. And then my middle daughter's a writer, and she's really interested in like mythology and folk tales. So her idea is to explore that in the different countries that we're traveling
cool.
in and like put our own spin on it. So I think, I don't think people necessarily think about bringing those hobbies or passions or professions or those curiosities into their travel experience. But I think, like you said, it's just such a cool way to connect really deeply or differently in a way that you're traveling, because you're not just kind of observing, but you're actually becoming like integrated into the exchange.
Yeah.
So I think it's really powerful in bringing our travel a little bit more depth.
That's great. Your girls are doing that. I want to come along. I want to see them doing it. That's so great.
Yeah, well, we'll be sharing and definitely looking at your website as a model of, how to tell stories and share things that are personally valuable, but also valuable to others. Because I think that is something we could definitely talk about in the world of content creation. But what I did want to talk about too is really traveling more sustainably with our children. And I'm wondering if there are things that you've learned as you've curated information for the website, or things that you've learned on your own travels about ways to like travel more sustainably and create a more positive impact as you're traveling with family.
Yeah, definitely. Well, both. And just by doing the research too, I have learned so much. I mean, there's a wealth of it, and also from your podcast. Hello. I mean, the wealth of information from your guests have led me to so many different places. And I've just become a sponge for all of this information, because it is really new to me as well, generally. I mean, I saw it from the ground from our travels, but actually applying it into kind of a resource hub for people to check out, especially families who we know, I mean, most families, even though they are a large subsector in the travel industry, most families are just trying to take that 2-week break and decompress and get themselves from A to B, understandably. I mean, raising children, having a full-time job, not having tons of parental leave and support, you just want to decompress probably on a beach. It sounds pretty great. But taking the next step in the look at what the possibilities are within crafting a trip, as you know very well, as being a traveler and also planning a big round the world trip with your girls right now. You know that there's a lot of easy tips and tricks we can do to keep things sustainable as far as, in our direct environment, but also the deeper levels of how we can approach travel. So a couple of the first things that you and I both know, and many people know, is that we don't have to really pack and bring all of the stuff. You can take a different look at what kind of gear you're bringing. There's a way of reframing that. Also, of course, are minimizing all of our single-use plastic. There's all these things that are just easy ways to keep everything light, simple tricks that any family can really apply. But then we would talk about, maybe considering alternative modes of transportation once we got to our destination, or maybe checking out a different alternative city that wasn't the main hub or the main capital. These kinds of things that it's so easy to say, I'm going to go to Paris and stay in Paris, or I'm going to Barcelona and just checking out Barcelona and not really thinking about getting outside into the other regions, which that makes so much fun. So much fun it's more fun for the kids. It's more fun for us. You have more freedom, and you're kind of by default supporting the communities outside that normally don't get the redistribution from travelers. So there's a lot of little tips. I know you're really well versed in it, but I think the fair weather family traveler doesn't know, and they would be welcome to take some of this information.
Yeah, no. And I have found it's really interesting for me, because as a family traveler and as like mom planning travel, my brain is still really wired in a different way of traveling. It's very easy for me as a solo traveler or as a business traveler or designing the trips that I travel. But I find that my muscle memory, weirdly not there for family travel. And even like you were saying, like needing to have everything, making sure everyone's needs are met, everyone's comfortable. Like that's kind of the mom brain trying to wrap itself around the travel experience. And then that is very contrasting with some of the, the ideas that I would like to bring forward with sustainable family travel. So it's so interesting, even as like entrenched as I am in this realm, how hard it is to think about it in terms of traveling with a family. And then, like some of the things we've recently been examining, like we just booked like our first transatlantic flight. So, that's going to be one of the big ones to consider for carbon offsetting, or, what our emissions are, and trying to do a nonstop flight. And then, to look at other factors, which are a lot easier now when you look on booking platforms that tell you like your carbon emissions and things. Just, and more importantly, even with that, is then having the conversation with my kids about that. And then talking about, when we're getting from this place to this place, and if we want to fly or take a train, and then like they would say, okay, well, the train will definitely be better, right? Or the bus will definitely be better. And then in some cases you find that actually maybe the flight is because of all these other reasons. And so I think for people listening to know, like, unfortunately, there isn't one easy answer. And also, fortunately, there's just like no one answer. So we get to play with it a little bit and see how our style of travel, how we can make those different choices. And like you said, one of the easiest ways is just to get off of the tourist track, so that our money is really going and supporting local economies and local people. And like you said too, our kids often get overwhelmed and overstimulated, just like we do, in the waiting in lines and hustle and bustle, and to like go and just be on a farm or be in the wilderness. Like those things are inherently more sustainable, but also more pleasurable. And I guess even more sustainable from the aspect of being able to travel longer, because you're not burning out as you're doing these more intense and stimulating experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. We just said, but piggyback on that, we just did a little road trip in northern Spain for Easter, and we went and saw all the UNESCO sites. And UNESCO sites are a really good way to get you. Of course, you have some UNESCO sites in the metropolitan areas, but there's also a lot. If you look on the UNESCO World Heritage Site website, there's so many in the world, and they take you really off the grid. And these are small little places, and you will find yourself in a little village somewhere, and they have an amazing museum or some sort of, a tomb or some archaeological site that really nobody's visiting, and you get to be the one to visit it. And this is by default. You have this incredible, some of my best experiences traveling have been just this surprise UNESCO site in the middle of nowhere. And we overnight, and we just have the best time there.
Yeah. And I think what I've loved too with my kids, sometimes I think, oh, they wouldn't be interested in that, but they love seeing, like, they always ask, is there any kind of ruins or buildings, castles? They feel very much like they're discovering things. And like a short hike to seeing one of those things, that's like their very favorite type of travel experience. That's what I've learned, so far with them. And so I think it's a really good way as a parent to kind of be curious about what they love and what they get excited about. And while it might feel really important to see the Eiffel Tower, it also might be a really great experience to take them and see this other thing that's not on somebody's bucket list, but is going to be just a much more enjoyable and pleasurable experience. And I think that's the other thing that's been, for me, going back and forth between being like a slow traveler and that pull of like, but you're not you can't go to this place and not see this. It's right there. And again, like I will tell you all day long, from like this position, you'll be fine. But then there's some part of me, like when I'm taking my kids, that I feel opposite of that. And it's such an interesting dynamic for me to just be witnessing in myself, and then knowing full well, like once it's happened, I'm going to be fine, that we didn't do whatever was expected of us because we had this other great experience. But maybe for people listening, they might be navigating a similar challenge and trying to figure out what to choose and how to choose and move through a destination. One of the things that I also really wanted to talk with you about is the ways that travel helps us to understand the environmental circumstances that we're facing and provide more context, and how we can use this to help facilitate conversations with our children. And, even in our own selves, we start to be able to see things more. But how have
Yeah.
you seen that happen in your own family, or in any of the travelers that you've talked to? How have they used travel to help facilitate that type of conversation with their kids?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Well, obviously, we know that, by seeing things with our own eyes, it puts things into great context about the real reality that the environmental challenges that humanity is facing, from the plastic on the beach to rising temperatures, which kids wouldn't really notice. But I mean, any child can see a picture of a sea turtle with a straw in his nose and feel sad. I mean, my kids starting at age 4 were feeling this. I mean, they understand that kind of contextual situation. For instance, we partner with a beach cleanup, which they're here in Germany, and they just went down to Morocco last week, and they were with Surfrider down there, which is a great organization for ocean lovers and helping protect the ocean. They did a beach cleanup down there. And when you think of Morocco, you're wanting to go surf and hang out on the beach, but they actually have the 10th most plastic pollution of any country on the African continent. And we think it's coming from the Mediterranean and kind of flowing down. But it was incredible how much trash they all collected. And they had all sorts of people that came, kids, families, everybody was helping with this beach cleanup. And it was amazing. But this is also a way of looking at the reality. We don't want to see that when we're traveling. You would just want to see what's beautiful, but this really is perpetual, and it will happen more and more. And so just starting the conversation about that, obviously our kids understand that through line, and it's going to be a lifelong conversation for them as well, because they're going to have to deal with it. So that's just one example my kids come to beach cleanups with me. They don't really love to do it, but they understand. They'll go and they'll do it and make a game out of it. But yeah, and I'm sure your girls who are a bit older will be able to understand if you can piece together climate change, pollution, overpopulation, things that are, in the right way, maybe to start that conversation, so they can also be empowered and, be in the solutions mind as they get older. I mean, that's what we want for our kids, to be full of hope and also solutions based.
Yeah. And I think they do that so instinctively, like they have an emotional response when we're talking about the subject, but then they really quickly get to a solution, even if it's just a far crazy solution. Like they're really quickly thinking about what is that solution. And when you mentioned the sea turtle image, which I know is one that really stuck with my children, because we started carrying straws, I don't know, several years ago with us everywhere. And I remember, going somewhere and getting a drink, and they're like, "Oh, did you want a straw with that?" And one of my kids was like, "Don't you think my mom loves sea turtles?" or something like that. And, it was just so funny, because she just was like, really already committed to that choice and that action, because that thing resonated with her. And I'm really hoping as we travel, like, again, like we were talking about our own way of connecting, like they'll find the thing, that is kind of the thing that will be the thing that they'll be passionate about in the future because of this experience. And they'll likely all be very different. And activities that we can do. I was interviewing a woman who said that she went to this trash treatment plant, like waste sorting facility in, I'm trying to think of now which island it is off the coast of Spain, but regardless, she was trying to convey to investors about why we should limit single-use plastics in tourism. And so this was like where they chose to have the meeting, because people weren't really understanding the amount of waste that was being produced on this island. And so they went and they kind of showed them what was going on. And she said, how long do you think it took to accumulate this trash that's being sorted right now? A month, 2 months, a year. And they were like, "Oh yeah, definitely like 2 months, 1 month." And I can't remember now if it was like a week or less than a week.
A week. Yeah.
And it was just a huge amount. And it such an impression upon them that as then owners of hotels and businesses,
Yeah.
they were like, oh, it's very important, but they had no way to have the context for, if you're taking 5 shampoo bottles out of your boutique hotel every week, maybe that doesn't feel like a lot of trash that you're creating. But when you look at the larger picture across the entire industry in a small area like that, and then you begin to like take that out across the whole country and things like that, then I think those types of experiences, like you said, of picking up the trash, it's really important. And I remember traveling in Bali right after the rainy season, and there was plastic pollution everywhere. And my heart was just broken because I'd been dreaming of coming to this destination for so long, and, frustrated I wasn't getting this experience that I wanted to have, but then realizing, these people that live here, this is really the problem that they have to endure always. I'm lucky, I'll go home and leave this behind me. But again, I just think those are those experiences that are so important and can really be a catalyst for conversation and for change and for action. It's why I think traveling is so important. And then being honest and having those hard conversations with our kids at their level.
Okay. There's also a couple of, we just did a couple of articles that I would find really cool, maybe, for a burgeoning scientist. And if you have one of the girls is into science, there's citizen science that they can jump on, which is, I haven't really explored that yet because my kids are still young, but I'm starting to, there's apps and there's all sorts of ways that they can actually be scientists in the world. And there was a quote saying that kids actually make better scientists than scientists themselves because they're thinking more creatively about solutions. And what better way is to travel and kind of, take data of biodiversity and, different wildlife species, and you're uploading it to the cloud and you're actually helping the greater movement. That's just one of the things that you can do, or if someone's trying to kind of give back and be part of the conversation while they're traveling. Also, there's coral restoration, coral gardening, a lot more that are happening on coastal, coastal resorts and so forth. They're trying to teach their visitors about coral gardening, and of course, beach cleanups. You can probably Google to see if there was one if you were going to a beach destination. And also rewilding, which we just wrote about, which they're doing these amazing projects here in Europe with rewilding travel. So you can go out and like track bison in Romania. And I can't wait to do that with my kids when they're old enough. That just sounds amazing because you're actually contributing to, watching the rewilding populations and watching the biodiversity grow back. And it's such a good educational experience for them as well. So there's so much, and I think it'll just grow and grow as we get more tapped into it.
Yeah. And I do think kids love that. Like, I do think they
totally
love science. I mean, that's all. If you watch children play, they're always out there digging and building, exploring, and they're on their hands and knees and they're paying attention to things. And I have even myself, when I'm trying to be more present in travel, my youngest daughter, we call her JoJo. And so like, I'll be in a situation and if I notice I'm kind of distracted or whatever, I'm like, what would JoJo do? And I was like, oh, she would go pick up that rock, or she would notice that flower, So it's a great way as a parent to reframe your own travel experience to embody their curiosity. But I do think they love that kind of experience. And then they also love knowing that what they're doing is valuable, just like I would. And so for them to be able to contribute, we're looking at a few volunteer programs, or like going to some different through animal. Oh my gosh, I don't know why I can't remember the names of anything today, which is less helpful for my listeners, but I'll tag it.
Happens to me every day, all day.
In the show notes. Yeah, this is really the result of mom brain. But we're going to be looking at one in Costa Rica, going and helping to tag turtles, and then doing some mangrove projects to help preserve mangroves. And so there's all these different activities in that region that the kids can be involved in. And I just think it's great. A fun way for them to learn. And, as people travel long-term with their children, and this is one of the questions I had all the time, is like, how am I going to educate them as I'm going? We kind of talked about this in the beginning, but like realizing we don't need to formalize that, but so much learning is going to happen just being out there and exploring and creating kind of these world schooling educational opportunities for them as we move.
Yeah. It's going to be great.
Well, this was another thing that really resonated from our previous conversation. And we alluded to it a little bit before when I was talking about how instinctive it is for me to keep my kids like comfortable and safe as we travel. And you had said something about getting away from traveling for our children's level of comfort and gearing travel towards their level of growth, which I thought was just incredibly profound. How do we navigate that? How do you think we can find that balance between caring for our children and keeping them safe, but also supporting their growth and like pushing them a little bit outside of their comfort zone?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, well, every child is different. Every child has their needs and their sensibilities for sure. But I know, I mean, from my experience, first of all, traveling with little ones, with babies, they really only need you. They know that they're safe when they're here. I mean, we've dragged our babies when they were infants through, 3.5 weeks through Namibia in a camper van truck, or Myanmar, right before COVID. I mean, kind of intrepid stuff, but never once was there a situation where I felt like we were unsafe and my husband felt like we were unsafe. And I know that the kids never felt like they were unsafe. I mean, there was nothing where they felt, and they were smaller, of course. There was moments when it was a little intense with maybe people trying to come to my daughter when she was a 4-year-old, and we were moving around through Asia, and that with the, kind of a little bit with touching and stuff. That was the only time where I said, okay, now I feel like she needs to be more protected with me. But other than that, and we have had the most incredible time trusting them with their adaptation, especially as they get older, because my daughter's 7 now, learning how to communicate, letting them be free and kind of like communicate on playgrounds in different languages and kind of grow into these amazing, really world travelers, but also international human beings and really global citizens, just naturally by allowing them the space to roam and trust that. I think kids are adaptive, they are malleable. And just as we were speaking about this, it just tapped into me because we live in Germany and I come from the States, and there's a big emphasis on self-management and trust here. So their playgrounds here are insane. They're so big. There's like a zip line going onto this thing. And when I first moved here, I was like, there's no way. Like, my kids can't climb on that thing. There needs to be like the rubber mat and everything. But nobody was giving a second look. These little 4-year-olds just dangling by themselves across the zip lines. Like, that would never fly in the States. But by trusting and allowing them to kind of make their own decisions, no one has ever gotten hurt or really fallen down from that zip line. And that's been the case for the most part with us with travel. And so I think if we are encouraging flexibility and kind of pushing them to try new things, also little things like food and, the easy things, experiencing that adventure, I think by incremental steps, they're going to grow faster than we ever even imagined. And they blow my mind. So I know that is because I have a lot of friends and people who come and they want to know this exact question. Like, they're feeling like they want to be on a routine when they're traveling or keep it how it is at home, but you have to let go of those routines in order to grow. And I think through that, you really shift the vibration of your family, because we are, when we're together, we just vibrate. When we're traveling together, we are like a well-oiled machine. And there might not be the nap at the time that my son usually takes his nap, but we know he's going to get a nap sometime in the day. And it's always been fine. If it shifts a little bit, we've always managed to make it happen. Or combating jet lag or any of the stuff that can be hard. You just stick together. And I have really good jet lag tips, by the way. You would have them as well, since you've been through so much.
Yeah, I don't know about for my kids, but we'll see. I honestly feel like, I don't know, I guess we'll see. I feel like they won't really suffer from it as much, because I think so much of it is really in our head and noticing we are on a different time zone. And like, our number one rule has always been like, we are where we are. So as soon as you get there, be going like, yesterday it was 8 p.m. and today it's 2 a.m. or whatever. Like,
also 8 p.m.
Yeah. So not helpful, because then you get really disoriented quickly, but I know in communicating back and forth to home, obviously you'll be aware of those differences. But yeah, that's one of the things that we have always tried to do. And then to try to travel over a night so that when you wake up, you just are where you are as well. Like you might be tired, but at least, you just feel like you've hit the restart button as soon as you wake up and you're there. And those are just a few of the things that we have done, but I definitely think it will be more interesting for this longer type of travel. But I think the other thing that you said was interesting about like how to keep on schedule and how to, again, like almost like recreate home where you're traveling feels like this instinct to do. And doing that, we're really kind of doing a disservice to the travel experience. And that's one thing too that I've really had to try to combat overthinking about traveling for a year, and knowing like we are going to do some kind of not traditional, but some education online. And I'm like, okay, but we'll just do that for 2 days this week, and then we'll play for a week, and then 3 days this week, or, like not a every day, Monday through Friday for this many hours or anything. Definitely letting go of the idea that would exist. I don't even want it to exist. Like my kids are like 2 weeks until we don't have to wake up on time for a whole year. This is what travel.
That's their incentive. That sounds like my kids. Like, yes, we get to watch a movie on the plane.
So I think all of those things are so fun about how you start to travel with children and play with the ideas of kind of getting the most out of travel with them. Are there any other things that you have experienced traveling with kids that have really kind of amplified the depth and the meaning of travel for you, really witnessing an experience through their eyes, or how they have opened something up to you that maybe you would have missed if you hadn't been traveling with them?
Oh yeah, so many of them. I mean, I'm just writing an article right now for this German magazine about why kids are door openers in travel, why they're such door openers. Because when we first traveled with my daughter, when she was an infant, we did 6 months round the world trip with her she was, I think, 7 months. And then we went all around, and I think she was about 10 months, and we ended up in Namibia, and we were driving all around, and we drove up to Opuwo, where there's a beautiful community of semi-nomadic pastoralists, and it's matriarchal. And so they're women who are basically running the show there. And we went, and I had her, had her in the baby carrier on my hip or something. And she looks like a disgruntled little coconut, like always a furrowed brow with this red hair, but we know she was having a good time in between all of it. So, but I had to nurse her when we were there, because we met these women, and it was so great because they were all laughing because I looked like a grandmother. I was 37, and to them, they had babies and they were much younger. And we just sat in a circle together and we were breastfeeding, and they were just making so much fun because, I was the grandmother in the situation. But my point is that I really feel like I learned almost how to mother in a way through the travel experience and meeting women from around the world. Whereas if I didn't have my kids around, especially a baby, we might have exchanged words, but we would never have that maternal bond. And that has really, really informed A, how I'm a parent, B, how I view the world and what the world is worth fighting for. And C, even take a deeper dive into some of these communities we visited and really what they're doing for the planet and how important they are. And I don't think I would have noticed that had I had just been flying through with Michael, if he was, shooting them or he was on an assignment. I don't think I would have had that connection with them, but having the children really bonds you that way. So I just think, and I think kids of any age, they can be teenagers. I think it's an automatic icebreaker because children exist everywhere. And we all have that funny, kind of common bond that shares all the stories of what it's like to be a parent. And you can apply that while you're traveling and find so many new things. So, yeah.
I think it is between women, I think too, it's such a great connecting point because like you said, it really transcends, cultural barriers and, any ways of living and being is that it's so instinctive, especially when you're thinking about breastfeeding. Like, obviously that is something
Yeah.
that's so easily translated between women around the world. Like, we all know that what that journey is like, and it might be different, depending on where you are, but at its core, it's just so like human and true. And I think that's always powerful for me anyway. But like you said, you throw children in the mix, and like they'll like start to play with each other, and then that opens the door for us to communicate perhaps with the other adults, or to slow down and pause, because otherwise we might have just walked right past, but now they've connected and we're taking time for that. And the other thing that you mentioned, that your child had the furrowed brow and red hair. So I don't think we talked about this before, but two of my children are redheads. And in traveling in the past, actually, that has been something that has been very interesting, because it's not in a lot of places, especially we took my oldest to Costa Rica when she was 5, and there were so many people that just followed her around because they were so curious about hair. And also she's like just super pale. So she just really stands out in that space. And I felt like there were a few times I felt like I needed to be a little defensive and protective, because that curiosity was pretty intense. But I'm very interested to see what that experience will be like too, because it's very different than my own. Even traveling somewhere and being someone who's almost 6 feet tall with blonde hair and blue eyes, like that gets some curiosity happening in certain places. But then to add these little redheads that I can't even take to the grocery store here without somebody making a comment. So I think that's another, just, I don't know, that cultural difference is such an interesting thing to take into consideration when you're moving through places.
Absolutely. And you have 3 girls, right? And it's all females. I'm really interested to hear how that's going to play with you as a whole traveling around the world, because these are young women. It's going to be fantastic. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, I think that'll be very interesting too, because like you said, and you landed in a culture where that's more matriarchal. So there's a different way, of the way that women are perceived and the way women move through spaces. But obviously that's not the same every place that we'll go. What my oldest daughter is like, I can't wait to go to Scotland, where like maybe no one will notice my red hair. Maybe they'll be like, oh, look at that blonde girl, like to her sister.
Oh, that's great.
Just like witnessing the ways that they see the world, I think is really important as well. Well, before we end our conversation, Samantha, I just wanted to kind of open it up if there's anything else that we've missed that you would love to share about this, or any other, kind of powerful experiences you've had traveling with your children that would be resonant for our audience.
Oh, I love every moment of it. And we really honor having our life and our community and our home here. So when we do travel together, it's an amazing, adventure together. But every trip we take is just filled with wonder and education. And this is really what I want to share on our platform, because travel stories are one, but we're also sharing the stories of other travel families who are traveling in a completely different way, which is, mind blowing. We're going to feature a family that just cycled all the way down the length of Chile, or is like 250 kilometers, with their toddlers, with little wagons. Camping out, and just absolutely stunning photography and stunning writing. And I said, we have to get you. This is such a cool way to reframe like sustainable travel. What about biking around and just taking this adventure? So, I'm learning every day from other families as well. And I feel like there's only going to be more of this, and put it in opportunities and the potential to visit and explore and discover the world in more traditional ways, where we can kind of give back to the planet and be a little bit deeper. Just traveling with us is going to take the first step.
Yeah. I'm going to pause just for a second, because again, I can't tell if it's my connection or your connection. Oh, there we go. I think you're back, but we'll wait just a few more seconds. If anybody's watching the live feed, you'll endure, and the podcast will get the edits. So, Yeah, I think learning from other people and their travel experiences is so powerful. Obviously, that's part of why this podcast I think is so important as well. But I think a lot of us might feel like when we have young children or children in general that we can't travel. And it's just so powerful to see all the ways that we can. And like you said, how adaptable our children are, how much they add to
Yeah.
the value of our travel experience. I think especially coming from a Western culture, we're told how difficult it will be or how hard it is for them or for us, or, that there's just, it's not worth the hassle or the time, or also that they should be in school. Like there's all these things that we
Yeah.
hear about the way that we can't actually travel with our children. And I think especially over the past 2 or 3 years, people have prioritized that. And we're seeing even more and more of a commitment to creating global citizens with our children and allowing them to like build that into who they are in order to create humans that will kind of create the next way of being from a deeper understanding of what it means to be out in the world. And I think for me, that's what I'm just so excited about, and what I think is so important for other people who are considering traveling with their children. I remember early in my travel career being in Kenya, and I was visiting some of the slums in Nairobi, and we were visiting a school, and one of our work colleagues who we didn't know was also traveling in the area had brought his children to the same school, and watching his kids play with those kids. And they did their choir did a performance, and then these kids hopped right up and started singing. And like, it was so powerful because for me, I was like processing about 20 different layers of, understanding and misconceptions or perceptions and all these things. And these kids just played and sang. And I just remember thinking like, man, if I ever have kids someday, like I want them to have this experience, because whatever's happening right here is the thing that needs to happen in order for us to grow as like into healthier civilizations with healthier global relationships. And I'm sure that that's something that you've seen or felt in your children as you've traveled.
Yeah. I mean, and you really see, I mean, how relaxed they are and at ease in the world. It's just amazing. And they have their little character issues as well. It's not like my daughter is the easiest peasiest in the world. As I said, furrowed brow, wild red hair, disgruntled coconut, doesn't like to get photos taken of her very often. But with that sensibility, she's still able to communicate. I just watched her when we were up in the Basque country, because we did that road trip. And there's kids in 3 different languages, and she has no problem. If she doesn't speak the language, she still plays and is using hand signals or trying to come up with the word. And just the adaptability and flexibility and empathy, I think that is what we need to give to our kids now, so they can have this as character traits as they get older and turn into adults.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this time and conversation.
Thank you.
Before we end, I just have a few rapid fire questions, which I know you listen to the podcast, so these you're familiar with, but we'll jump into those before we wrap up.
Okay.
The first one is, what are you reading right now?
That's funny. I was reviewing and reading the book that inspired a large portion of this website. It's called All We Can Save. It's an anthology of climate essays by women. And these are climate activists and scientists and marine biologists. It's a super profound collection of books. It's one of my favorite in the whole world. And it really kind of is like a bit of a travel book, because you're hearing about stories of women from around the world, but how they are managing climate resilience or the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and the descriptions of these places and what's happening now. But I love the way that these women are centering on our climate future, but with hope. And just beautiful. There's poetry involved, and there's, funny essays, there's comedy, and it's kind of centers around all of the different facets of how we can come together from a female perspective. So I highly suggest that, especially to listeners of this podcast, because it's extremely empowering. So it's called All We Can Save.
Excellent. I just wrote it down, and I feel like that needs to go into my reading for the next year.
Yeah.
And I also loved, this just reminded me of an interview I had with Sophia at Tour Radar. She was talking about, we often talk about our footprint when we travel, which feels kind of negative, but she said that they like to talk about your handprint, which is really this positive way that you can think about. And you were talking about, kind of these stories as a barometer for hope. And that's something that's just been sitting with me to think about how we can kind of create storytelling from that space, especially sustainability.
Oh yeah. You're going to love this book. I know it. I know. Bring it on your trip with you.
Yeah. I think that sounds like the right.
The audiobook is really good because there's a lot of really great voices on the audiobook. I suggest the audiobook as well.
Excellent. What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
Oh, one thing I always have to bring they're called stasher bags. I'm sure you have them, or there's silicone little carry-on reusable bags. But when I don't have those, I feel like I'm at a loss of everything at this point in time because, they hold snacks and everything, but they really, if you're going on a road trip or you're traveling through countries where maybe you're not going to have lunch later that day and you can pack up, especially for kids who are needing to snack all the time. We were in Kenya last January and I was so thankful for them because I would just put their extra little breads that they weren't eating and they would eat that through the rest of the day. And any sort of silicone or a compartment where you can bring your food along is a total game changer, not just as a parent, but I think just as a traveler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And the other thing that came with me from cloth diapering my children were the waterproof bags.
Oh, the wet bags.
Yeah, that you would put their diapers in. But now I take that as always in my
everything.
Yes. For swimsuits or who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You need to
that's another one.
Yeah.
Totally.
To sojourn is to travel somewhere as if you live there for a short while. Where is a place that you would still love to sojourn?
I've never been to Bolivia. I would love to go to Bolivia. I would love to venture around in South America. I started taking Spanish lessons recently. So I think I'm intentionally or unintentionally putting my efforts into traveling to more Spanish speaking countries and to actually be able to communicate. So I just started lessons about a week and a half ago. But I would love to see Bolivia and also move around the entire continent of South America.
Yeah, that is kind of the language that we're focusing the most on learning during travels. We're going to do an immersion when we're in Mexico.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's another good thing for your kids. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you eat that immediately connects you to a place you've been?
Well, it's so funny that you asked that because I've been living in Germany for the last 12 years. And so even though I've been living here, it's always just so funny to see German food pop up when we are traveling around, or even I go back home to San Diego, it's California, which actually has kind of a strong German culture there with the Brauhauses and so forth. But anytime I'm out of Germany and then you find a Semmelknödel or some even pretzels with, Butterbrot or Bratwurst, it brings me back to my current home, which I think I'm always feeling like a traveler here because this isn't where I was raised. And there's just so many cultural innuendos and differences, of course, when we choose to live in a place we weren't raised. But I always kind of make that connection with wherever I'm at, or a large, Pilsner. So I know we live not far from Munich. So Oktoberfest is plenty here.
Yeah. Well, my German roots, even though I've not been to Germany, all resonate with all of those things as well. So,
oh yeah,
really. Who was a person that inspired or encouraged you to set out and explore the world?
Well, I guess unintentionally, I would say it was my dad, because my parents, they divorced at an early age, and he moved to San Francisco, and my mom, we were in San Diego, and we used to get on an airplane in the 80s. I was thinking about this every other weekend to get on a plane and go see my dad. And I was like an 8-year-old and my sister was a 6-year-old, and it was like, okay, good luck, And I think through that, it was sad, but it was also kind of, we grew into different ways, and I have a different relationship with my father because of that. Going to San Francisco on the weekends, and just being a person in a different city as an 8-year-old, it was a totally different type of formative relationship or growth. And I think that also kind of informed me being, fearless enough to attempt music as a career when I had not studied it in school, and probably also meet my husband and decide to follow him around the world. I think that instilled a sense of adventure or maybe confidence at an early age to get out and explore. And he always said, he's like, Sam, get out of California, go see other parts of the States, go to college in, the middle or the East Coast. And I think that kind of always ran with me. So I tip my hat to my dad for that.
Thank you. If you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
Well, I just was speaking about she's real and she's my sister, but I was just up in northern Spain, like I spoke about, and there's the Santiago de Compostela is there. So there's the Camino de Santiago is this beautiful, the Jacob's Way, which is the pilgrimage trail. And as a parent, as you know, like I'm dying to do a trip for me where it's like, I want to backpack and I want to just walk in silence. And my sister also wants to do that. And we were extremely close. So I would love to do a kind of a pilgrimage trek with my sister, starting up in Basque Country and kind of weaving down for a couple of weeks. I think that would be tremendously healing for me. It would bring us together. Our children are older now. We can do it. That's something that I think I would love to do in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I keep telling my sister I would love to travel with her because as an adult, like we have such a different relationship, and to be able to spend that time there and travel and learn about each other in a different way, I feel like it would be a really powerful experience. So I hope that you and your sister are able to manifest that into reality soon.
Me too.
The last question is really a soul of travel is for honoring women in this industry. As you know, who is one woman that you admire and would love to recognize in this space?
Oh, that's easy. Because I just listened to them in the last week on your podcast, but there's two of them. One is Hillary Matson from Yugen Earthside, and the other is Christina Beckman from Tomorrow's Air. And these were two women that I met very early on. We became Instagram friends, but we became immediate friends, and we've collaborated since then. But I really am giving them a thank you of gratitude for taking the time to connect with me as a total newbie in this space and just share and collaborate with an open heart and have the same, intention and goals in mind, and both for different reasons. I love Hillary because she's so smart and she's so funny. If you ever see her TikToks, I absolutely love her. But the platform that she's creating is genius. And we did a really cool one with her about family travel trips that they were promoting. And it was so fun collaborating with her about that. And I wish her all the best, and because I think she's going to do fantastic. And Christina, of course, with Tomorrow's Air, amazing forward-thinking solutions, which I think we need to bring that to the travel space, and which is why I immediately gravitated to connecting with them. And we've done a couple of collaborations as well. But just thinking of our future and what can we come up with that hasn't been created yet, hasn't been invented yet, to kind of curb our future. And I think that Christina's super tapped into that. And I'm so excited to see what they do. And we're a part of Tomorrow's Air. We're subscribers. And so I'm lucky to be part of their ecosystem and their world as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for mentioning both of them and sharing a little bit more about the work that they do. Listeners, you can definitely go back and check out their episodes, but two people who I really admire. I've known Christina for a really long time, and seeing her evolution in the industry, like she's one of those people that I'm like, whatever she's doing or whatever she's curious about, I'm just like, I will immediately check that out because I know it's something I should already be thinking about as well. Such a great way to end our conversation, Samantha. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the support that you have shown the podcast prior to being on it. And I'm so glad that we were able to chat here today.
Me too. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure. And I look forward to all of your other guests. I've had such a great time learning about all of them and becoming friends with a lot of them. So thank you.
Thank you.